comment as part of public comment? Okay. I just want to ask, Trishka, we've done this before, but should we keep open the public comment? Okay.
Correct. You would be continuing the public
Well,
hearing.
maybe. We have to decide what we're going to do.
What you don't want to do is, quote unquote, table the ordinance, because that means you're actually removing it from consideration. What you'd want to, if you don't want to vote tonight, then continue the public hearing to, your next meeting or whichever meeting you think you'll want to take it up again.
I just, honestly, with council, I don't know if we have time to continue this at another meeting this year because the ordinance envisions starting it in January. And I think it's important. I've had quite a few people reach out to me who are interested in serving, but I think the nature of this commission, we want to make sure we advertise it heavily to make sure that we have representation from a lot of different groups. The holidays are coming up. And I feel like if folks feel like we're close enough tonight where we want to try to hammer out some of the remaining issues, we can do that. Otherwise, I would recommend that we put this on the agenda for next year. So I just want to get a sense from folks of where they are.
Well, I have a few questions, but my preference would be to continue it this year because I get a chance to vote on it. But that's one person. But if I could just raise questions and comments based on the public comments today. The first is actually the last one raised by Ms. Cherry. She basically was requesting that the process be confidential, but we can't offer that. Is that correct? From everything you've told us, the mediation, any participation in this process requires consent of not just the person who's issuing the complaint, but the person they're issuing it against.
That's right.
So that is clear. We cannot offer confidentiality. The second, just make sure I'm understanding, I believe this is very clear in what was said today and also when it was introduced. Complaints against employees of the municipality go to the affirmative action officer. They do not go to the CRC, correct?
That's correct.
All right. The third sort of question or issue I wanted to just touch on, I think it was Ms. Fraga who raised a point attributed to Mayor Floyd that there would be municipal savings. I wouldn't see any avenue for that because it's a little different than avoiding a lawsuit by an employee or about an employee. That's not what this is about. Am I understanding that correctly, or am I missing something that should be clear?
You're correct.
All right. And the last question I have was raised by Mr. Heilner. He objected to the sentence, no individual members of the subcommittee shall have the ability to resolve complaints on their own. And he raised the point, but that's what they're doing today. So is it our intent to take that away from them? And was that a deliberate decision, or is that...
I can answer that one. I think it's covered pretty extensively in the board's committee and commission's handbook. So nothing in here precludes any individual from doing anything on their own. It's more doing it as the Civil Rights Commission. So an individual can't act as a Civil Rights Commission just as no member of council can act as council. And so individuals can certainly work out issues that they see, but if you do it as the Civil Rights Commission, it has to go through the process with the group.
And I think I understand that, but here's how I read that and how I think people might read it. If I'm a member of the subcommittee of the Civil Rights Commission working on this and I help somebody out who asks me to help them out, then I can be kicked off because I violated the ordinance. That's how I read that. And is that the intent?
No, definitely not. It's as if you do it, it depends sort of what hat you're wearing.
Okay, well, I'm just pointing out, as somebody who's not deeply involved in the process and who's not an attorney, when I read this as a layman who's reasonably well informed, that's how I read it.
And,
so I don't know if that's...
If as John Smith, you want to help somebody out, you can still do that even though you're serving on the Civil Rights Commission. What you can't do is act on behalf of the Civil Rights Commission and hold yourself out as I'm doing this on behalf of the Civil Rights Commission. That's the piece that you can't do.
Could we amend that sentence to end on behalf of the entire Civil Rights Commission or the subcommittee?
Just can you point me to the sentence that you're looking at?
In the
Section C.
Section 3C of the amended procedures that we received, so at the top of page 2.
Yep.
Can we tack on something at the very end of that section that basically says on behalf of the subcommittee or the Civil Rights Commission?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that I just want to note, the document, the guidelines, policies, and procedures document is not part of the ordinance. So even if you adopt the ordinance tonight, you're not adopting the guidelines document. That has to be done separately by resolution. So just to be clear on the process. But you can definitely change that sentence the way that you're suggesting.
So even with those answers, my recommendation remains what it was when I started my comments, which is I would prefer that we put it on the agenda for later this year.
Okay, and what I'm saying is I don't know if we can do that at this point. And also, I don't think we can do it with it starting in January because I want to make sure that we're able to, we can't invite people to apply before we've passed the ordinance. I don't think, unless council feels comfortable inviting people to apply to be on it, but it seems like you have to wait till we have an ordinance, and we can't put it on at the next meeting. After that, we're into the holidays, and it just feels like it's not, I think we're just going to have a hard time. I mean, I feel like we have to be really intentional about how we set up this commission, and we don't want to block people from it. Yeah, Ms.
I mean, I'll propose, it seems like most of the issues that we're discussing are in the policies, not in the actual ordinance. So I would feel comfortable, I know not everyone does, but I think it is important to get the ordinance in so that it can go into effect and we can do rigorous outreach. Mayor Floyd talked about talking to the clergy. This is not, the Human Services Subcommittee on Civil Rights has talked about wanting to do significant outreach to get the best possible. John Halmer talked about getting all the best possible people on the commission. That's not going to, we would never want that to be done in a week or two. So I think if we get the structures in place, surely we're all people of goodwill, and the issues on the policies can be worked out. There's already been several meetings. I haven't seen, Mark, is this the issue you've probably spent the most time on as administrator? So that demonstrates the good faith, I think, and you bring, so I think, especially if the alternative is not to get this done, I think that would be a dereliction of our duty not to act, given the national debates we're having, the issues we've already had this year, whether it's, beer pong to police stops to everything that's going on, and we can continue to debate policies as we should, but we need to get the structure in, and we need to get the best group of people we can on this thing so they can start meeting and start working. And if this pushes till after Thanksgiving, there's no way we can say that we can do that in professionally and in earnest. So I would say to move that, and that we would all be making the commitment to continue to work on the policies, understanding that we're not necessarily going to agree on all of them, and that's one thing that the Civil Rights Commission will have the right to report back next year if they feel like certain things are not. I mean, everything is an iterative process, and this makes it an iterative process. But it also returns to perhaps, I think one thing we found is that drafting on the fly, 7 of us, plus counsel and administrator, is not when we're at our best, and it returns to a more deliberative process when the administrator can think through the policy issues in a way that's more collaborative, and they can notice a meeting with everybody from the subcommittee and really hash through it in a way that's much more conducive to being thoughtful rather than our on-the-fly editing.
Ms. Crowell?
Yeah, I second that. I mean, because we can work on the policies and procedures, can we not, and then do those in one meeting? So it seems doable, and I agree that doing it rather than not doing it is preferable.
Yeah, I think I've said this going back months, that it's important to have something on the books and to get rolling. I've heard the concerns from everyone, and I I take them to heart. I appreciate it. Just hearing the name of Jim Floyd, who was such a fighter for so many years in this town, it's it really meant something to hear that. And Princeton is a unique place. I think Letitia mentioned it was one of the best places to live, and other members mentioned how much Princeton means to them. And I do believe, and I've heard where everyone said we want an ordinance, but we want to do it right and get it right, and I understand that. But also heard where most people had no problems with the ordinance. It was in the procedures and policies that people had the problems in. I would hate to see this fall by the wayside and for us not to begin in January with some bright, intelligent people ready to help Princeton move even forward. So I'm in agreement to pass the ordinance, but I'm only in agreement to pass the ordinance if we give maybe a timeline or a time where we can meet and discuss the policies and procedures, because I don't want anyone to think if we pass the ordinance that we're not going to go back and revisit these. So I wouldn't mind, and I know Councilman Simon said that he wants to be one of the voters on this, so I wouldn't mind passing the ordinance at all.
Is our next meeting not until the 14th of November?
Correct.
Yeah. I also don't know how you can go out and start to recruit if we don't have the guidelines, policies, and procedures down. At our last meeting, when we introduced the ordinance, I think we asked for this to be ironed out, and I understand that everybody's busy, but if the first meeting from the last meeting only happened at 11 o'clock today, and as a council person, I'm getting this draft as I come sit down at the table at 5 of 7, that doesn't seem fair either. And I agree with Elizabeth Bates that I think if you're close and you can work this out, then it wouldn't take much time at all at the next meeting to approve this. And I think Patrick's point is quite right that the policies and procedures sort of operationalize the ordinance. And getting this at 5 of 7, when there was an entire month to meet at 11 o'clock the day of the meeting, just doesn't seem, that feels like we're doing it on the fly. So if put to the test, I don't want to see this fall by the wayside either. There's a lot that's gone on into this, but I'm not going to vote in favor of it because I think it's important to have these policies and procedures. And I think we can do it successfully by ironing out whatever it is, these things that remain, although I would want to say that I would not want to compromise on that number C, on letter C, the one about no individual of the subcommittee. I do think that they can't operate on behalf of the subcommittee, but anyway.
And that's fine. That was the amendment that was proposed. All right, so I'm actually going to make a motion that we continue the public hearing at our next meeting, November 14th. And the reason behind my making this motion is I reject the argument that we can possibly pass the ordinance and later pass the procedures. If we can pass the procedures at a subsequent meeting this year, we can pass the ordinance at the same meeting. They're going to take exactly the same amount of time. It's not a legitimate argument, in my opinion.
I'll second that.
Okay, well, there's a motion and a second, and I will just say that November 14th is a bad meeting because we're likely going to have an ordinance introduction for possibly 6 or 7 zoning ordinances that are going to take a lot of time, and I can't put this on the agenda because we've put it on the agenda multiple times, and there's a discussion, and there might be people, I can tell you, I've gotten calls from other people who are interested too, and I just want to make sure that we have time for a discussion of it. I don't think it's fair to just say we're going to put it on, but we're going to have no discussion. And I know we're going to have a very, very crowded meeting at the November 14th meeting. And so it's just not possible for that meeting. The first meeting we could possibly put it on would be November 28th. And again, I want to remind Council that if we're not passing the ordinance until November 28th, that means we can't start recruiting people until after the holidays. And there's just going to be this is going to be, it's a wonderful thing, and I'm fully supportive of it, but administratively, with our boards and commissions, it is going to be disruptive, because you're going to have people moving who want to move from human services onto civil rights. There's going to be a lot of openings. It's exciting, because we're going to have a whole new group of people who are involved, but we want to do it right. We want to make sure that people who are interested in this have time to find out about it, and the boards don't get all appointed before somebody knows about it. And so, so I would say that if we postpone it, we are running that risk. Okay, but there is a motion and a second on the table. Further discussion, Ms. Cromwell?
Right, I do not support delaying it either, mainly because I don't think there's any chance that the ordinance is going to be changed by the policies and procedures. There doesn't seem to be any disagreement about the ordinance itself. So it makes a lot of sense to me for the reasons Liz just said about recruiting the committee. I don't think it's going to change who we're going to recruit, or who we're going to appoint, rather, and who we're going to invite to apply. So I support going ahead with the ordinance tonight with the promise from all of us, and I think we all know that we will work as hard as we can to find agreement on this.
Mayor, I also just want to comment before the vote that I'm going to vote no on this delay, because I fear it would result in, it would hamper our efforts to recruit, to do the real recruiting and outreach and relationship building that's important to do to have this be the commission that it should be. And I think it actually then gives us the time to get the procedures right.
Okay. Is there any further discussion before the vote? Okay, Madam Clerk, you better call the roll on this one.
Ms. Howard?
No.
Ms. Crummiller?
No.
Mr. Liverman?
No.
Ms. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Howard, excuse me.
Whoa, big mistake there.
Mr. Simon?
Yes.
So the motion fails, and is there any further discussion on the ordinance?
I just want to say before we go on, I think all of us up here are heading in the same direction. You know, when they say you're in the church and on the same pew, I think we're all heading in the same direction. I don't think anybody here wants anything different but to do the best that we can. But the key is the timing. And I think it's important to do this correct, but it's also important to do it. And the more and more we delay, and the more we keep going backwards, it's not really helping us. So I'm thinking, by voting for the ordinance, it's going to push us to get the policies and procedures done the correct way that'll be beneficial for the town. That's how I'm looking at going forward with the ordinance. So I'm going to vote yes. And can I make a motion that we move forward and accept the civil rights ordinance as read?
Yes, you may.
Second.
And seconded by Ms. Howard. Any last discussion by anybody?
Yeah.
Mr. Simon?
Yes, I'm going to vote no, as people would expect based on my comments up till now, for the reasons I explained. Basically, I've never been comfortable with declaring victory when you don't actually have victory. And I also feel like this is a bit of the tail wagging the dog in terms of the process we're describing right now. I'm not happy with either of those. I think the arguments to do it the way we're doing it, the majority of my colleagues intend to do it tonight, are simply mistaken, and I hope they turn out the way they promise they will, but I don't have full confidence that they will, so I'm going to be voting against it.
I agree. And, the next time we ask that there be meetings and this stuff get ironed out, it would be nice that if it's not the day of the council meeting and we don't get the stuff at 5 of 7. I mean, we didn't see the revised policies and procedures until we got to our seats tonight. I work. I don't have the time to look at this stuff, and I think it's unfair to ask us to try to read this on the fly during the meeting. There was plenty of time for this for multiple meetings to take place. So it's disappointing that it all came down to the last minute. And if we're really going to get these policies and procedures done so people understand what they're signing up for, I just don't see how the timing is any different. We still have to bring the policies and procedures back to council, don't we? Are we going to bring them back to council? We're just going to pass...
The policies and procedures will be brought back as a resolution.
All right, so
Council.
I don't understand how the timing's really any different. So I'm also voting no.
Okay. And before we vote, I just want to remind everybody that the complaint process is only one part of what the Civil Rights Commission is tasked with doing, and I don't want us to lose sight of those other really important fundamental pieces of what we're asking this commission to do, which is to help make our community a more inclusive one by doing proactive education. Really, any complaint that comes in is... I think the commission is going to succeed in a way as the complaints start going down. I mean, I know there's a lot still going on in the community that we need to address, but getting out there before it happens and making sure people understand their words and their actions and the importance of us all being one community and interacting with each other in a respectful way, that's really the core purpose of this. And from the folks I've been talking to who are interested in joining, that's what they're motivated by. And I agree that I feel like we're very close on the policies and the procedures. I think there's some areas where there just may never be agreement. And for those, I think that it's, I think Heather often says, don't make the perfect the enemy of the good. We are somewhat limited by the fact that we are a municipal body and that this will be a municipal commission. And so there are going to be certain things that we want it to do in terms of offering people privacy, having certain flexibility that you could do if it were a nonprofit, and we just don't have that. We do have, though, the stamp of the government, and I feel like that's one of the reasons why having a Civil Rights Commission is so important in Princeton, even though we have groups like Not in Our Town that do fabulous work, even though we have the YWCA that does fabulous work, it's different when it's the municipality putting its stamp on it, and that's why I think it's so important and that we move forward tonight. I guess the public hearing is technically still open, so we'll have one last comment. And
Wait,
then,
can I also...
Yeah, sure. Ms. Clement.
I just want to make sure that we are going to have meetings in a timely manner as soon as possible.
Yeah, definitely, and I would recommend that we have this done by the 14th, even though I don't think we can have it on the agenda for voting until the 28th. Okay, Mr. Parker.
You all